it seems that there was a number of Storm Shadow cruise missiles fired at a target in Rostov-on-Don, Rostov Oblast. We don't know exactly where that was at the moment, but we've seen some images of recovered debris, which seems to be pretty clearly a Storm Shadow. This would mark the second known incidents of these British or French supplied cruise missiles being fired at a target within Russia's internationally recognized borders, which obviously the Putin regime made a big deal about this being a red line, and the Ukrainians have repeatedly crossed it without that much of a response, to be honest.
President Zelensky of Ukraine has now admitted that Ukraine cannot retake Crimea and the occupied Donbas from Russia. The Ukrainian leader is turning to diplomatic solutions, he suggests, to get the land back, but Ukraine would have to rely on pressure from the West. Jimmy Ruston is a journalist and Ukraine analyst who's living in Kyiv. Hello to you, Jimmy.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi. So, well, for Zelensky to say that retaking Donbass and occupied Crimea would not be possible by military means, I guess that's a recognition of the inevitable, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. I think it's a recognition of the current military reality, which is that neither Ukraine nor Russia are currently capable of achieving their maximalist war gains goals, with military means. So I think he's acknowledging what most people already know, especially in Ukraine. And I think this will be, in some ways, welcomed by a lot of Ukrainians because they feel that the government has given false hopes in many cases that the Ukrainian military can somehow retake Crimea and the whole of the Donbass. It's definitely a step, but I think it's a welcome step in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, we hear that Russia has been losing maybe 1,500 soldiers a day on the front line. The economy of Russia has been taking a further hit, but there's no diminution of Putin's determination here. How much could Ukraine achieve before the front lines are frozen, if they are frozen, ahead of peace talks?
I think that's the key question. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty about what will happen when Trump comes into office. And I think both sides, you can see the Russians pushing very, very hard in Kursk. They're throwing huge numbers of troops, including North Korean troops, at the Ukrainian forces currently occupying that part of Russia. And obviously, you can see the Ukrainians desperately trying to hang on because it does give them leverage. I also think that in regards to the Ukrainian position, we still see the Ukrainians holding territory that Russia believes is theirs. They have put into legislation that Russia now controls Zaporizhia Oblast. Ukraine controls the regional capital of Zaporizhia Oblast. Russia says that they control Kherson Oblast. Ukraine still controls the regional capital of Kherson as well. So I think we're still a way away from where both parties could even begin to start negotiations, because the Russian government and Putin has repeatedly said that he will only enter into negotiations when Ukraine actually agrees that Russia, owns these territories, which would mean Ukraine having to evacuate two regional capitals with a combined population of over 1 million people, and that's never going to happen. No Ukrainian president would ever agree to that.
And before you leave us, you've been tweeting, haven't you, about credible reports of another Storm Shadow Scalp EG cruise missile strike inside Russia.
Yeah, absolutely. So it seems that there was a number of Storm Shadow cruise missiles fired at a target in Rostov-on-Don, Rostov Oblast. We don't know exactly where that was at the moment, but we've seen some images of recovered debris, which seems to be pretty clearly a Storm Shadow. This would mark the second known incidents of these British or French supplied cruise missiles being fired at a target within Russia's internationally recognized borders, which obviously the Putin regime made a big deal about this being a red line, and the Ukrainians have repeatedly crossed it without that much of a response, to be honest.
All right, Jimmy Ruston reporting there live from Kyiv. Thank you very much indeed. I now want to say good afternoon to Andriy Osachuk, who's from the Ukrainian Olos Party. Hello to you, Andriy.
Good evening. Thanks for having me here.
Evening to you. So now we have Volodymyr Zelensky telling a French newspaper that Ukraine cannot recover Crimea or the occupied Donbas territory. Do you accept that that is the truth?
Look, all this rhetoric about retaking Crimea and Donbass. It's mostly about 2023. All 2024, we were mostly was trying to push back Russians in the south and southeast. At the same time, we conducted well-known Kursk operation to have some leverage against Russia. And I think for everyone in Ukraine understood that from one side, we will never agree with any occupation, temporary occupation of Ukrainian internationally recognized territory by Russian Federation. But from another hand, we very well understood that retaking of the territory has the price. And retaking of Crimea and Donbass should have huge price, which we will probably not ready to pay because we don't have so much resources. That's why for the moment, the focus of Ukrainian national and foreign policy is to try to stop Russians who are extremely aggressive, especially during last 2 months, and try to find the diplomatic way how to ensure just peace for Ukraine, and which is most important, how to obtain guarantees that this nightmare will never happen again. Yeah. So that's probably the most important question for today.
Okay, so but given that it is not practically possible to retake Crimea and those occupied Donbass areas, isn't the logic of that the sooner peace talks get going, the better?
Look, as more we are talking about peace talks, as more politicians in the West are pronouncing the word talks, as more happy Putin. Because FSB during decades has only one strategy. If they feel weaknesses of opposite side, they push harder and harder. Till today, the word negotiations in Putin vocabulary means surrender. And all statements from Kremlin, which we heard during last 3 weeks or last month, is only about surrender of Ukraine and the West. He is raising the bar as much as possible. He's pushing harder and harder, preparing for January 20th for Trump inauguration. And when we're talking about any possible settlements, we shall ask question not to Kyiv. We shall ask question to Moscow. For what they are ready. But till today, Kremlin is repeating the same story again and again. They want surrender, they want destruction of Ukrainian state, and they want push Ukrainians out of their territory. That's what they want. So that's why I think Donald Trump and his team will have very, very hard time since they come to the office in January 20th.
Right. I mean, there's no guarantee that talks can even get started. But if they do, we know pretty clearly that you, on the Ukrainian side, would wish guarantees from NATO of Ukrainian territory if and when the lines of battle are frozen. I mean, do you first of all just basically accept that you could not join NATO while in dispute over territory? That's basic NATO doctrine. And in any case, Hungary would not allow it, to name just one member.
Look, it's understood that NATO has a lot of internal problems because countries like Turkey, especially Hungary, Slovakia, so they sometimes do very destructive things. But for the moment, we may only speculate what kind of mechanism of guarantees Ukraine may receive. Yes, it's understood that Ukraine is not welcome to NATO right now because some of NATO countries are just afraid of Russia. And that's the problem of these countries and the problem of NATO. From another hand, it's understood that Russia will never welcome any NATO troops as the peacekeepers on Ukrainian territory. So that's why the issue is absolutely open. But the only thing which is clear for us in Ukraine, that the only way to find the settlement in the Ukrainian war is through strength. As stronger Ukraine will be, as more chances that we will find some solution which will provide guarantee of peace and security, not only to Ukraine, but to European continent as minimum.
All right, Andrei, thank you. Andrei Ozadchik from the Ukrainian Holos Party, and as ever, Andrei, we wish you well.